The doorbell rings. And for a moment, just one moment, you stand completely still. Because you know who's on the other side of that door. It's your son. Or your daughter. The one you haven't spoken to in a long time. Maybe it's been 6 months. Maybe it's been 3 years. Maybe it's been so long you've stopped counting. Because counting was too painful. And now, they're here. They agreed to come. And you have no idea what to do next. Do you hug them immediately? Do you cry? Do you bring up everything that happened? Do you pretend nothing happened at all? For over 40 years I have worked as a family therapist, sitting with parents just like you, in moments just like this one. And I can tell you with complete certainty, what you do, and what you don't do, in the next few hours will matter more than anything you've said or done in the past year. Today, I'm going to give you the 5 most important things to do, and the 5 things you absolutely must avoid when your child comes back after a long silence. This isn't about winning an argument. This isn't about getting an apology. This is about opening a door that you never want to close again. Let's begin. Before we get into the list, I want to spend just a few minutes on something most videos like this skip over entirely. People assume that estrangement, the long silence between a parent and a child, means someone is cruel, or selfish, or doesn't care. In 40 years of practice, I have rarely found that to be true. What I have found, over and over again, is that most adult children who pull away do so because of pain they didn't know how to express. Misunderstandings that accumulated over years, never addressed. Differences in values, political, religious, personal, that made every visit feel like a battlefield. Or private suffering, depression, a difficult marriage, identity struggles, that had nothing to do with you, but that made connection feel impossible. I say this not to excuse the silence. I say this because if you walk into this visit believing your child is your enemy, you will behave like they are. And they will leave feeling the same way they did when they stopped calling. There are 3 things you need to understand about this first visit. 1. It is not a resolution. It is a beginning. 2. It is fragile. More fragile than it looks. 3. How it ends will shape everything that comes after. So let's talk about how to make it go right. Here is something I see almost every time a parent prepares for a reconciliation visit. They rehearse. They lie in bed at 2 in the morning, going over what they're going to say, how they'll explain their side, how they'll respond when, not if, the child brings up that old argument, what they'll say to make the child understand. And I want to gently tell you, please stop. Preparing your words is preparing for a debate. And a debate is the last thing this visit needs. What I want you to prepare instead is your heart. Here is a simple exercise I have given to parents for decades, and it works. Sit down, tonight or tomorrow morning, before the visit. Take out a piece of paper. Write down 3 things you are feeling. Not 3 things you want to say. 3 things you genuinely feel. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's fear that this won't work. Maybe it's just an ache, a deep, quiet ache that you've carried for a long time. Write them down. Look at them. Acknowledge them. And then, fold that paper up. Put it in a drawer. Or burn it if you'd like. Because those feelings are real, and they deserve to be honored. But they do not all need to be spoken today. The goal of this visit is not to explain yourself. The goal is to connect. Those are very different things. The space you create for this visit sends a message before a single word is spoken. Choose a room that doesn't carry heavy memories. If you had your worst arguments in the kitchen, maybe sit in the living room instead. If the dining table is where old wounds were opened, a cozy sitting area might feel safer. Keep it simple. A light snack is fine. Coffee, tea, something small. But I'd encourage you to avoid alcohol. Alcohol lowers inhibitions, and in a situation this delicate, the inhibitions that lower are rarely the helpful ones. And please, do not invite other family members without your child's knowledge. I know the temptation. You want your other son there for support. You want your daughter-in-law present as a buffer. You think it might soften things. What it actually does is make your child feel ambushed. They showed up expecting a quiet, private visit. They walk in and see an audience. I have watched reconciliations end in the first 5 minutes for exactly this reason. Keep it just the two of you. Or if your spouse or partner will be present, make sure your child knows that ahead of time and has agreed to it. The environment says, you are safe here. Make sure it actually does. This one is hard. I want to be honest with you. This one is genuinely hard for most parents. Because every instinct you have says, I need to explain myself. I need them to understand my perspective. I need to say what I've been holding inside for months. But here is what the research on estrangement consistently shows. Adult children who return after a period of silence need to feel in control of the reconnection. They took a risk coming here today. They don't know if it's safe. They are watching your every response for signs that the old patterns are going to repeat. If you take over the conversation, even with good intentions, you confirm their fear that nothing has changed. So instead, practice what I call curious listening. Ask questions more than you make statements. Not interrogating questions, not, why did you stop calling? But gentle, open questions. How have you been? What's been on your mind lately? Is there anything you've been wanting to talk about? And if there are long silences, let them breathe. Silence is not failure. Silence is sometimes two people slowly remembering that they're safe together. The most powerful sentence you may say today is also the simplest. I'm just glad you're here. Say it. Mean it. And then, listen. There will be a moment, and you will feel it when it comes, where the silence in the room isn't comfortable, where both of you are thinking about the thing you haven't said yet, the time that passed, the calls that weren't made, the holidays that went by empty. You can acknowledge it. In fact, I think you should acknowledge it. Pretending the silence never happened doesn't make it disappear. It just sits in the corner of the room, growing heavier. But there is a crucial difference between acknowledging the gap and assigning blame for it. Compare these two sentences. You really hurt me when you stopped calling. Versus, I missed you. That time was really hard for me. Both sentences are honest. But the first one points a finger. The second one opens a door. I missed you is an invitation. You hurt me is an accusation. And even when the accusation is completely justified, even when you have every right to that feeling, leading with it on this first visit will almost certainly shut things down. I worked with a woman, I'll call her Margaret, 68 years old, hadn't seen her daughter in 2 years. When her daughter finally agreed to visit, Margaret had prepared a long list of grievances. Legitimate grievances. Real pain. But in the session before the visit, she and I worked on replacing every accusation with an acknowledgement. She practiced saying, I know it's been hard for both of us. Just that. Nothing more. She called me the day after the visit. She said, my daughter cried. She said no one had ever said that to her before, that it was hard for her too. That visit led to 3 more. And then to a phone call every Sunday. 4 words changed everything. I know it's been hard. This is something very few people think about, but in my experience, it may be the most important thing on this entire list. How a visit ends shapes how it is remembered. Psychologists call this the peak end rule. Our brains tend to judge an experience based on its most emotional moment and its final moments. Which means, even if the visit had awkward stretches, even if there were a few hard minutes, a warm and hopeful ending can recolor the entire memory of the afternoon. So as you feel the visit beginning to wind down, don't let it just fizzle out. Don't let the silence get uncomfortable at the door. Don't end on an unresolved thought. Instead, offer something small and forward-looking. Not a grand gesture. Not a demand. Just a small, gentle opening. I'm really glad we did this. Could we do it again sometime? Or even simpler, it was good to see you. And then, let them go. Don't hold on too long at the door. Don't send 17 texts that evening. Don't call to analyze every moment of the visit with your friends. Give the visit room to settle. Give your child time to process. The seed has been planted. Let it grow. I need to say this clearly because it is the single most common mistake I see. Do not use this first visit to relitigate old conflicts. I know. There are things you have been waiting to say for a long time. There are misunderstandings you desperately want to clear up. There are moments from the past that still sting, and you want finally to address them. And those conversations may need to happen. Eventually. But not today. Here is what's happening in your child's nervous system as they walk through your door. Their brain is in a mild state of alert. They are scanning, unconsciously, for signs of threat. Is this safe? Is this the same as before? Will I regret coming? In that state, the human brain literally cannot process complex emotional arguments. It cannot hear nuance. It hears tone before it hears content, and if the tone feels like conflict, the walls go up. Repeat this to yourself before the visit. Today is about reconnection only, not resolution. Resolution may come. In a third visit, a fourth visit, maybe a quiet conversation 6 months from now. But you cannot get to resolution without first establishing safety. And safety takes time. Give it that time. This one is delicate, because most of the parents I work with don't intend to guilt trip. They say what's true. They share what they feel. They think they're being vulnerable. But there is a very fine line between vulnerability and emotional pressure. And in the fragile atmosphere of a first reconciliation visit, that line matters enormously. Let me give you some examples of sentences that sound like sharing, but function like guilt. I've been so lonely since you stopped calling. Your father cried himself to sleep more nights than I can count. I just don't understand how you could go so long without reaching out. The holidays were unbearable without you. Every one of those sentences may be completely true. Every one of them may reflect real, legitimate suffering. But what does your child hear? They hear, "You did this to me." They hear, "Your absence caused this pain." They hear, "By coming here today, you are responsible for repairing it." And what does that feeling produce? Not warmth, not connection. It produces guilt. And guilt, in the context of a fragile reconnection, makes people want to flee, not stay. Ask yourself this question honestly. Do I want my child to visit because they love me? Or because they feel guilty? Because those are two very different relationships. And only one of them heals anything. I want to revisit something I touched on earlier because it deserves its own dedicated warning. Do not, under any circumstances, use this first visit as an opportunity to bring in reinforcements. What I mean is, don't have your other children present without prior agreement. Don't have a sibling sitting quietly in the next room, ready to come say hello. Don't arrange for your spouse to call during the visit so you have backup. Don't ask a mutual family member to drop by. I have seen every version of this, and every version ends the same way. Your child walks in feeling like they've walked into a courtroom, like the visit was a trap, like they're outnumbered. Even well-meaning family members in this setting become a source of pressure. Because when there are multiple people in the room, your child can't be honest. They can't be uncertain. They can't be messy or emotional or confused, which is exactly what healing requires. This visit needs to be a safe space for just the two of you. Your other relationships, with your spouse, your other children, your siblings, all of those matter. But they do not belong in this room today. Now, this is a sensitive one, so please hear me out. Many older adults, when they reconnect with an estranged child, feel an urgent need to communicate the full weight of what the separation has cost them. And part of that, understandably, involves health. My blood pressure has been terrible. The doctor says my stress levels are through the roof. I haven't been sleeping. I've lost weight. Again, these things may all be true. They may be directly related to the emotional pain of estrangement. But I need you to think carefully about what your child hears. They hear, "My absence made you sick." They hear, "My choices damaged your health." They hear, "If something happens to you, it will be because of me." And now, in the very moment they were trying to take a step toward healing, they are drowning in responsibility and fear. There is a difference between, "I want you to know how I've been," which is connection, and, "Look at what this has done to me," which, however unintentionally, is a form of pressure. You can share that you've missed them. You can share that you're happy they're here. But the detailed accounting of suffering? Save that, if it needs to be shared at all, for a much later conversation, when the relationship has solid footing again. What your child needs to feel today is this: I came back because I wanted to, not because I had to. Let them feel that. Protect it. Of all the things on this list, this may be the one that catches parents most off guard. Your child agreed to come. They're sitting across from you. And yet, they seem distant, polite but guarded, present but not fully there. There's no tearful reunion, no big hug. No, "I've missed you so much, Mom." And your heart breaks a little. You wonder, did they come here just to reject me to my face? Please, hear me on this. What you are seeing is not rejection. What you are seeing is self-protection. When someone has been hurt, and when reconnecting with the source of that hurt, the human nervous system does not immediately relax. It tests the waters first. Your child may want to feel warm. They may have cried in their car on the way over. They may have thought about this visit for weeks. But their emotional guard is still up because they have been hurt before, sometimes in ways they haven't fully processed themselves. I call this the frozen hug. The body shows up before the heart does. And the worst thing you can do in that moment is misread it. Because if you interpret the guardedness as coldness, and you pull back or get hurt, or say something like, "You seem like you don't even want to be here," you have just confirmed every fear they had about coming. Instead, stay warm. Stay steady. Stay open. Don't narrate their emotions. Don't ask, "Why do you seem so distant?" Don't make them perform the warmth they're not ready to feel yet. Just hold the space. Be the steady, soft, patient presence. Let them warm up at their own pace. Most of the time, by the end of a visit like this, the frozen hug becomes a real one. But only if you are still there, still warm, still safe, when they're finally ready. Before I leave you today, I want to say one more thing. I've been a therapist for over 40 years. I've sat with parents in their 80s who were still waiting, still hoping, for a child to come back. I've sat with adult children in their 40s who were still carrying guilt and grief about a parent they couldn't figure out how to reach. And what I've learned, more than any technique, more than any list of do's and don'ts, is this: the bravest thing you can do is stay soft when everything in you wants to defend yourself. It is not weakness to hold your tongue. It is not weakness to let them lead. It is not weakness to end the visit without resolution, without apology, without a clear answer about where things stand. That softness, that willingness to be open without demanding anything in return, is the only thing that ever truly brings people back. You have waited long enough. You have rehearsed the conversation in your head enough. You have grieved the silence enough. Now, let the healing begin. One quiet visit at a time. If today's video spoke to you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share whatever you feel comfortable sharing, your story, your fears, your hopes. This community of people over 60 understands what you're going through in a way that very few others can. If you found this helpful, please give it a like. It helps more people like you find this channel when they need it most. And if you'd like to go deeper, my next video covers what to do after the first visit, how to keep the connection alive, and how to navigate the slow work of rebuilding trust over time. I'll see you there. Take care of yourself.